Good morning. I'm Ann Doss Helms. My pronouns are she, her, and I am one of the co-chairs of this year's Board of Trustees.
And I am Paul Wilson. My pronouns are he, him, and I am also one of the co-chairs of this year's Board of Trustees.
And I'm Jay Leach. My pronouns are he, him, and I am minister of this community.
These are words from Kathleen McTeague.
We come together this morning to remind one another,
to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives,
to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment,
until we claim for ourselves
awareness and gratitude,
taking the time to look into one another's faces
and see their communion, the reflection of our own eyes.
This community of laughter and silence, memory and hope,
is hallowed by our presence together. We are aware that there are those of you who are watching our live stream, and I want to welcome you especially to this service. I'm glad you are here. There's a message on Facebook, on our public Facebook page, a greeting for you. I invite you now to greet one another in the comments on that Facebook page. And now, for the first time in 2 years, I invite us to stand and greet one another.
Today, we light our chalice in memory of those we have lost, in celebration of everyone who is with us, in this sanctuary or online, and in hope for our future together.
This is a reading from an essay by Robert Cording entitled "Love Calls Us to One World at a Time." We eat while reading the morning paper, rush off to work in cars or public transportation, passing by those things we have seen each day for years and have long lost sight of, and finally reach work, our minds rehearsing what must be done and inventing that daily to-do list that never, of course, entirely gets done. But we also know those moments when we return to our senses. I mean here, our capacity to perceive the fullness which exists in each moment and is always waiting for us to be present to it. Each of us has had countless experiences of being returned to our senses. When, say, the field we are walking through or the city street we are walking down suddenly captivates us, and the trees in the distance and the way they align with the field's grasses and contours, or the buildings and the play of light on them and the people walking, all feel as if they belong exactly as they are.
After a brisk 27-degree start, the weather in Charlotte on March 8, 2020 moderated. By that afternoon, it was pleasant, partly sunny, 61 degrees, a light breeze was blowing out of the southeast. We gathered here for services, considered words from Frances Ellen Watkins Harper and Angela Davis, saying, "Be the change you want to be in the world." Then lined up for greetings and hugs at these doors before moving into Freeman Hall for coffee and conversation. As if unwitting characters in some macabre Edgar Allan Poe story, or maybe Harry, Hermione, and Ron in a scene scored with quivering stringed instruments. While we laughed and talked in close proximity, an airborne virus was projecting its way into our lives at the speed of a 50-mile-an-hour unmasked cough. Oh, look back on us then. On that early March Sunday in 2020. Look back on us with envy for what we did not yet know. Look back with pity for the ways we would soon descend into a world for which not one of us was prepared. Days later, we announced the regrettable need to suspend in-person gatherings here. In our naivete and lack of knowledge, we said this cessation would reluctantly be in effect for the entire rest of the month. That Sunday, that pleasant, partly sunny Sunday, was 2 full years ago. Since we last assembled for an open service in this, our sacred space, 104 Sundays have passed. The sun's rising rays have entered these windows for 734 quiet mornings, and its setting glow shimmered through them on 734 silent evenings. Apart, we've marked 2 Easters, 2 Thanksgivings, 2 Christmas Eves, and for each of us, 2 birthdays. Apart from this place, this gathered community, we've witnessed so much. Oh, what our eyes have seen. With each breath we drew, that the world drew, SARS-CoV-2 found its way deeper and deeper into our lungs, into our lives. Like some threatening storm rumbling in the distance, the reports of illness and death reached us long before they became realities to us. But the winds did pick up. The flashes and crashes grew ever nearer, and soon we were buffeted by a storm the likes of which we have never experienced. Made all the more ominous because, in fact, we couldn't actually see or hear it at all. Now, in its silent, stealthy 2-year wake, almost 500 million cases, over 6 million deaths, and possibly 3 times that many, countless millions suffering and grieving the trajectory of all of our lives, forever redirected. We who have watched this whole horrific storm from forecast to aftermath are wounded, diminished, changed. Oh, what our eyes have seen. It alone has left us reeling, but it is not alone. There were other sights, other scenes now seared into our memories, leaving us all the more wounded. Even as the storm was gathering, we watched as murderers in pickup trucks engaged in a violent act of vigilante injustice, leaving a lone jogger dead in a daylit street. As things were shutting down, we witnessed a young woman's murder, gunned down in her apartment by a barrage of police violence for the offense of sleeping while black. Weeks into the pandemic, we watched as a brazenly nonchalant murderer with a badge rested his knee on the neck of a helpless, gasping man in the broadest of daylight. The shocking deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd cast a long light into the depths of 400 years of darkness. And for the first time, some could finally see the way things have been and are. Waves of rage crested, then came crashing down, flooding through the streets of our nation's city, including in our own shiny uptown, where on one fraught night, those assigned to protect and serve opened chemical warfare on a group of helpless human beings. And now we're left to hope that the volume of Biden's new call to fund the police, amplified by his fear-filled party's enthusiastic ovation, will not drown out the plaintive cries, the prayers. Black lives matter. Oh, what our eyes have seen. How really could we reflect on these last long months apart and overlook the shocking spike in anti-Asian violence, the disturbing implications of the Me Too movement, the children sleeping in cages on our southern border, or, of course, the divisive, damaging rancor of political discourse evidenced by a violent, lethal insurrection in anything but a peaceful transfer of power. Just as we are regaining our equilibrium, beginning to imagine a future beyond the worst of the pandemic, now comes a war. So brutal and unimaginably cruel that we can hardly bear to see the images of daily atrocities. And all the while, the icebergs have continued to crumble into the ocean. Sea levels have inched ever inward. Wetlands have disappeared. Wildfires have ravaged forests. Hurricanes have ravaged coastlines. Tornadoes have ravaged towns. And floods have ravaged cities. Oh, my friends, what our eyes have seen. We are wounded. We're diminished. We're broken. In conversation after conversation with different ones of you, I hear it. The fatigue, the struggle, the mental and physical health challenges, the relational family strain, the professional dissatisfaction, the institutional uncertainties, the wondering, where does this leave us now? We cannot come back together and blithely ignore these truths about our individual and our collective lives. We've sung it already. We who now gather know each other's pain. We've come together today to celebrate, certainly, but also because we're broken, wounded, weary, and worn out. We've come seeking connection, community, this place, this experience. Here, our lives in all of their complexities meet. Here we hold out. Here we hold up hope. That together we can find our ways to a place, if not just right, then at least a place of comfort and of healing.
Our next reading is from Jack Gilbert, titled A Brief for the Defense. I'll warn you that it contains some grim imagery, and it may invoke the despair that a lot of us flirt with whenever we see the daily news. But the message is one that I needed, and I hope it speaks to you too. A brief for the defense. Sorrow everywhere, slaughter everywhere. If babies are not starving someplace, they're starving somewhere else, with flies in their nostrils. But we enjoy our lives because that's what God wants. Otherwise, the mornings before summer dawn would not be made so fine. The Bengal tiger would not be fashioned so miraculously well. The poor women at the fountain are laughing together between the suffering they have known and the awfulness in their future, smiling and laughing while somebody in the village is very sick. There is laughter every day in the terrible streets of Calcutta, and the women laugh in the cages of Bombay. If we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. We must risk delight. We can do without pleasure, but not delight, not enjoyment. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world. To make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. If the locomotive of the Lord runs us down, we should give thanks that the end had magnitude. We must admit there will be music despite everything. We stand at the prow again of a small ship, anchored late at night in the tiny port, looking over to the sleeping island. The waterfront is 3 shuttered cafes and 1 naked light burning. To hear the faint sound of oars in the silence as a rowboat comes slowly out and then goes back is truly worth all the years of sorrow that are to come.
One recent night, I arrived home late, tired, hungry, disturbed. Dragging up our walk, I was stopped in my steps. All day and night, while I sat in a wearying mix of fluorescent and Zoom screen light, our irises had been soaking up an early March day's unseasonable warmth. There before me were dozens of slender stems, each topped by an exquisite alabaster blossom. My heart leapt. I hurried inside, invited Melissa to join me in that experience of awe. Life abounding in prolific beauty. Are you bowed down in heart? Do you but hear the clashing discords and din of life? James Weldon Johnson once asked poetically. Are you? Aren't we? A bit, at least, bowed down in heart. The poet proffered a prescription. Then come away, come to the peaceful wood. Here, bathe your soul in silence. Now, James Weldon Johnson knew clashing discord. He didn't avoid life's din. He had written previously, "Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died," had written, "We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered," words we recognize from that so-called Black national anthem. And yet here he is inviting, silently listen, and suggesting that once quieted, we will hear, as he puts it, the diapason of God's grand cathedral organ, filling earth for you with heavenly peace and holy harmonies. This early 20th century Black poet's words themselves harmonize with words from a 13th century Islamic mystic poet. Awe, wrote Jalaluddin Muhammad Rumi, awe is the salve that will heal our eyes. Awe, the capacity to see, to feel, hear, say, awe is the salve that will heal our eyes. We've seen, we've noticed, we've taken in and tried to process so much. And it has wounded us. Awe is the salve that will heal our eyes. Heal, make whole, make holy even. For isn't awe that deep experience aligning our souls with something profoundly sacred? Awe, being made whole by experiencing the way that the sacred permeates every moment, catching a glimpse, however fleeting, hearing a hint, however muted, that wonder is never very far away. In embracing, attending to, and sometimes, if only figuratively, falling to our knees in sheer and utter praise, we are healed. It's what Anne Sexton recognized in her impulse. She wrote, to faint down by the kitchen table in a prayer of rejoicing as the holy birds at the kitchen window peck into their marriage of seeds. Oh, what our eyes have seen and could have seen. 2 years, 734 days since last we were in this room together, and each with its own sunrise and sunset. 2 years, 734 nights of the moons waxing and waning, the stars shimmering, and even meteors flashing across the ebony expanse. 2 full cycles in which the daffodils have arisen from their terrestrial slumber, stretched their green stems high, then intoned their sunny sonatas, singing in synchronistic harmony, lo, the earth awakes again. Ah, 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 alleluia. 2 years of dogwoods, as Camille Dungy writes, unfurling, she says, to the pleasures of the season. 2 seasons of hummingbirds back from their long sojourn south, booking extended stays around blossoms and feeders. 2 years in which waves fell upon shorelines near and far, their crescendoed crash moderating into receding susurration. So much awe. That salve that will heal our eyes. 2 years in which the indomitable, if we suspected before, don't we now know without a question the indomitable spirit of human creativity kept right on writing, painting, singing, playing, acting, dancing, all the while finding new outlets and new ways to stir and lift and challenge and entertain. 2 years in which the, oh, how can we not be amazed, scientific heart beat with such a reliable rhythm, producing vaccines able to suppress an imperceptible virus with one hand, while with the other fashioning new capacities to gaze so far out into the expanse of the cosmos that the facts and figures sound like ciphers culled from the pages of fiction. 2 years. Two years in which the magnificent magnanimity of the human spirit has been on full display in acts of profoundest kindness. 2 years. And now again, in Polish train stations and Romanian streets and Slovakian villages, the very best of who we are rising to the fore in embodied generosity and hospitality. Oh, have Tracy Chapman's words ever been any more true? I've seen and met angels wearing the disguise of ordinary people, leading ordinary lives, filled with love, compassion, forgiveness, and sacrifice. Heavens in our hearts. And aren't we now in complete and utter awe? The kind of awe that heals us and makes us whole. We can't argue or fight our way to wholeness. We can't self-medicate or anesthetize the pain enough to be made whole. We won't ever be healed by products or purchases, and we will not workaholic our way to wholeness. Awe is the salve that will heal our eyes, and Rumi writes, or at least Coleman Barks renders, and keen listening. I see you reaching for those phones. God, I've missed that. On how many lonely days in front of that computer screen shooting those videos would I have loved to have heard one of your phones ring? Ring on, ring on. We are wounded, diminished, changed. We leave these last 2 years battered, beleaguered, bowed down in heart. But all is not lost, not nearly so. For we are the species able to feel anger, anguish, anxiety, and awe. We're deeply aware, and rightly so, of all that has been and is so wrong. But in that memorable claim of Jack Gilbert to make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil, whether you believe in the devil or not. Truly, we live with mysteries too marvelous to be understood, Mary Oliver proclaims. And so she declares, "Let me keep company always, let me keep company always with those who say, 'Look,' and laugh in astonishment, and bow their heads, and bow their heads, and bow our heads in awe." May it be so.
Welcome. We're happy you're with us today in this room or joining us remotely. We're pleased to have guests with us in this room and participating through our live stream. Our members would like to greet those of you who are here following the service. So if you are visiting, please raise your hand and keep it up. Members, take note of guests seated near you and invite them to join you for conversation when the service ends. If you're visiting us by way of our live stream or viewing an archived version of this service, we'd welcome an opportunity to connect with you. Reach out to our membership coordinator, Kelly Green. You can email her at kelly@uuccharlotte.org. Should it enhance your experience of future services, We offer large print orders of service, personal hearing assistance devices, and have an elevator available as well. Welcome to each of you, visitor and member alike.
Thank you, Paul, and I want to echo what you just said. Welcome yet again to each of you who are here and those of you who are watching. How utterly, wonderfully amazing it is to see people here in these pews. So I am told that a decision was made to trade warmth for coffee today. We will forego the serving of coffee in our traffic circle as we had planned to do, since we noticed at noon it'll be about 35 degrees, and instead we're going to invite you over into Freeman Hall into a coffeeless, very warm experience together. Please stick around, greet one another, greet our guests especially. Your presence matters. Your presence here today matters. It matters in the days to come, here at 11:15 on Sundays and in other places too. I learned just this past week of one of the most engaging series of upcoming adult offerings we have ever offered. Check out the table that will now be in Freeman Hall and read Currents every Thursday. Your presence matters, your generosity matters. We're now sharing what we collect in our baskets, dividing everything evenly except pledge payments between our congregation and other organizations. It's a way to expand our generosity. This month, we are supporting our siblings in Black Lives UU. Please give liberally. Your concern matters. Today we hold with love Peg Argent, Tom Cole, Linda Dobson, Mary McNeil. Today I invite us to join in collective prayer, and especially on tomorrow for Bill Stepien. Bill's undergoing very serious surgery tomorrow. And we remember with concern Abby Stepien and Colin Stepien and Sheila Gallagher. And every day I remember in my prayers Jonah Whittle. Jonah's the son, many of you know, of our member Dara Whittle, grandson of our member Sage Brooke. Jonah is now in the active military in Eastern Europe. Grew up here in our open door school. Prayers of our hearts align with those the world around, for the besieged people of Ukraine, for bewildered refugees, for conscripted soldiers assigned to a madman's war, for the leaders of nations seeking some way to end this atrocity. In that mystical bond that binds each to all, may our concern be felt and compounded. My friends, we come into this room today with gladness, looking, as we said earlier, into each other's faces and feeling deeply our connection. And two, we must acknowledge assembling here finally brings to mind the many we have lost in our own community in these past 2 years. I am missing them today, feeling deeply their absence. Seeing from this vantage the seats where they so regularly sat, seeing those touched most deeply by their deaths. So too many of us in this long, long time apart have lost parents, siblings, grandparents, other family members, dear friends. The grief that accompanies us through all of our days feels more real on this day as we open our hearts together. At long last, we're able to share in the lighting of candles. At long last, while John plays the offering music, you're invited to come forward in silence, lighting a candle of celebration or sorrow, of remembrance. But for now, I invite us into a time of meditation. O mystery beyond all knowing, O font of wonders unceasing, source of life, dear God of all people, for profligate beauty, superfluous beauty, for beauty evident in all seasons, obvious now in this time of red buds and tulips and wisteria. We pause to notice and are filled with gratitude for human connections shaped into the form of patient lovers, loving parents, endlessly engaging children, grandchildren, formed into the shape of friendship and community, into this community. For the tenacious persistence of connections so profound that not even death can sever them. For memories that sustain these connections even to those we have loved and lost. We pause to remember, and we are filled with gratitude. This world, so beauty-filled, can be so cruel. For all those who suffer oppression, for all those derided for who they are, dismissed for trying to become and be who they really are, we pause to notice and are filled with compassion. For those who boost themselves by attacking others, who use platforms of politics and prestige to amplify narrow, restrictive, regressive messages, professing anything but life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We pause to notice, and even in our anger, we are redoubled in our commitment to offer another way. With our siblings, the world around, we pause now to pray for the people of Ukraine. In our shock, our horror, our helplessness, we hardly know what to pray. In simply noticing, bearing witness, in not averting our gaze, may compassion so well up in us that its effects will be felt so far from here. These and so many more are the prayers of our hearts, each of which we pray in the name of all that we know to be good and true and beautiful. Amen.
In sorrow and in awe, be generous. Reflect on all that has been given to us and give what you can to our community and our future. Be generous as a practical act and as a spiritual one. We will now give and receive the offering.
Please join me in an affirmation of our faith, rising in body and/or spirit. Look to this day. For it is life, the very life of life. It is brief course, by all the verities and realities of your existence. The bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of achievement. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope.
If awe is the salve that will heal our eyes, then surely music is the salve that heals our souls. Thank you so much. So wonderful to hear you again in this space. You sound good on recordings. You sound even better in person. Thank you for making this possible today. Welcome back to this space, Karen Record. So glad that you are here, Karen. Thank you for what you shared today. It's been so wonderful that we're hoping maybe we could get one more. May wonder companion you through your days. May wonder companion you through your days. May kindness and compassion flow from you and to you. May courage guide your steps. May awe heal your troubled soul. And may this connection, this bond of love linger in our lives until we are together again. And may, dear God, it not be 2 years from now. Please be seated.